Okay guys, so you probably saw my recent unboxing video at my favorite camera store actually in Michigan, Camera Mall, where I unboxed this beautiful thing here, the GFX100RF. And I was able to get this thing Thursday last week and then had to go out of town immediately to my son's graduation. My youngest son graduated from college over the weekend. So I got to take this camera with me, which was great. I got the call from them to pick it up, and I managed to get it and do the unboxing and then throw this camera in the bag as my only camera that I use going to my son's graduation event over the weekend. So I'm here to give you guys my initial or first impressions of this camera. So I want to go through the quality and build. I want to go through the handling and how I set the camera up for myself for use during the weekend. I'll make sure some images and things are going across. I'll give you guys a look at what I did, and so you can formulate your own opinions about my images. But and then talk about some things when it comes to this camera that I would like to see Fuji do on the next iteration and do with some firmware updates for this camera itself. So let's get going in it and let's talk about the quality of this camera. So when it comes to the build quality, I can tell you right now, it's definitely heavier than the X106 I have right here. It definitely is a better build quality. And I'm not saying that because this one's built in Japan and this one is not. I'm saying that because the GFX line has always been a higher quality build of camera over the X mount, Fuji X mount camera, or X mount line, I guess if you want to call it. So I'm not surprised that all the buttons are nice and stiff and firm and clicky, all on the dials and so forth. The toggle switch on the back, the doors and how they open and close for the ports you see right there on the left side, and for the nice 2-slot SD cards on the right side. Even the door, you hear those clicks? Even the door for the battery, which is the same battery that's in the most recent released GFX cameras, as well as XH2 cameras, the XS20 camera. The bigger capacity battery works nicely with this, all the way down to the use of the aperture ring. And I do love the knobs on there to give way better purchase than what I have on the Fuji with the two kind of like levers that are out there. Not that that's bad, and again, not that the X106 is bad in its quality. It's great. This is just a notch better. I do like the fact that I do have the flip up screen and how it seamlessly forms to the back. Now, as you guys know, I recently picked up some Leicas, and the Leica Q3, it bumps out to be able to provide that, which I understand folks who don't have this experience, that smooth over experience like that, along with the X100 series, how that could be a pain in the butt. So overall, build quality, I love. Everything has a nice resistance to it that turns, like the focus ring. Even the cap has a nice little force on it right now because it's lined with wonderful foam felt material that helps to keep it on here. And that focus ring drag is nice and firm, so it's nice and smooth and feels way more controlled on this than I would say on the X106. So when it comes to the build quality, yeah, they get top score for me on that. I say about the only thing on here I wasn't too excited about was the hot shoe cover, which is the same one that comes on all Fuji cameras, the little plastic one. So I had a metal one hanging around with the little Fuji X on there, so I threw it on there for now. Now, when it comes to the handling of this camera and how I used it, the biggest thing I noticed right away, because it's that much taller than the X100, I don't know if I'm going to get a half case for this camera. I would love to protect it a little more, but I don't know if I will, because when I grab the shutter button and I put my fingers on it, all of them fit. I have a little bit of a hang on my pinky, but they all pretty much fit on there very easily. I was able to hold this camera all weekend long with the hand strap, a wrist strap, I should say, and didn't think twice about it. Didn't think twice about my hand getting fatigued or tired. It just didn't. And that's because of the size of this, and the bump out is, I think, much more pronounced because the width of this camera is much more pronounced than the X100 series. So that was awesome. I like the fact that I was able to put all the aperture ring and on auto. I was happy I was able to put the or I should say put those features, exposure triangle, on the command dials and use this at a lot faster pace that I needed it on because of a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old running all over the place during the weekend. And I like that. I was able to go from using the dials on here to actually using the command dials to control the aspect ratio, the f-stop, the shutter speed, the ISO, and exposure comp. That to me is fantastic. And that's one of the things I like the most about the Fuji cameras, especially the X100 series line, the X Pro line, and the XT line, pretty much all of them, where you can do that. And I also like the fact that if I did decide to go to using the dials, that was easy enough done. So it, along with the fact of me currently shooting Fuji and knowing the menus and setting this up the way I need to set it up, I was able to set up 2 quick custom settings of the 7 that you can set up. One just for standard everyday type of a kind of encompassing everything type of photography with the standard film simulation, excuse me. And all I did for the second one, an action one, is set a lot faster starting shutter speed so that I can do some fast action shooting for that 2.5-year-old that was flying all over the place. So yeah, I never took it out as single autofocus. I kept it in that and shot it all weekend. And I believe I got some good images. And again, I'll show what I got outside of the event to share with you guys. And image quality coming off of this is just awesome. I mean, I have a GFX100 2. I've been in the GFX line since the 50R. I had the 100S when it first came out and switched to the 102. So I know what type of images I'm going to get off this sensor. And yeah, that did not fail, or I should say surprise me or disappoint me or something like that. And then when it comes to video, now I never really shot video that much on my GFX cameras. I like that this has video on it, and I do like that they made it stills forward versus video, kind of like with the X106 or X100 series. Once they started adding video to them, it did take some great video, but I can't say I was focused on that. So I think I have a video or two that I'll run across for you guys to see. And it, of course, did a great job there. But again, you're taking video at 102 megapixel sensor. It's a lot of data. I do like that the memory slots are the faster ones, the USH2, I believe. And I did get 256 gig cards from Lexar, which were nicely priced on Amazon. After reading what are the cards that they recommend from Fuji for this. So I got those Lexar cards and did a great job there. So when it comes to handling ergos and how I use the camera, this was second nature to me because of this camera. Now, when I talk about experience, so we'll go through that and my experience so far in using this camera. I've seen where people, even I think Fuji at their Prague event had the X106 up there and kind of saying that it was part of what led to this camera. From my shooting experience, because of the lack of, and I won't say lack of, because it doesn't have IBIS, I'm not going to treat it like it should have had IBIS. And because of the aperture on the lens, I don't count those as negatives. The shooting experience for me was like shooting the X100V, which didn't have IBIS, and it had a lower quality megapixels on it, but the lens was stellar. I feel the same way about this. I don't have IBIS, but I have a stellar lens, and the experience reminds me of that. If you hold your hand steady enough, with or without IBIS, you're going to get great images. If you put your shutter speed up fast enough, which you can on this camera, which is fantastic, especially with this leaf shutter, it's so quiet, you can get stellar images. So I recommend those who are concerned about IBIS work on a steady hand and work on also taking advantage of upping that shutter, which you can do on this camera to freeze action and limit motion blur when you're taking pictures if you're not that steady. If you're such that you're not steady at all, then don't get the camera. Get something with IBIS in it. If that is going to assist you in getting more camera images in focus and reducing handshake issues. As far as the battery, the initial use, of course, I burned through the battery quickly because I was doing a lot of stuff with this camera, getting used to it and excitement. But when it all came down to me having it charged, which I didn't bring a charger, I plugged in USB-C in it and it charged very quickly. Actually, I was pretty impressed at how fast it got it to 80%. I think I burned maybe half or a little over half each day. I used the camera and I opened this compartment up and plugged into the USB-C and it was charged to 80% or better in about an hour maybe. So that isn't bad to me. When it came to using the camera, again, reminded me of shooting the X100V or X Pro 3, anything that Fuji has that doesn't have IBIS. That's how this was, and I love the experience, and I'm going to continue to love the experience because I love shooting those cameras and still do. There was one thing I didn't like. I think that Fuji should look into as far as the firmware and update, and that would be this function button right here. I was hoping that like on the X106 that they would have allowed us to make that a record button where I can hit record and I'm recording. They didn't. So I'm now back to like that X100V or lower number experience where I'm having to go to the drive button, go to video, then go to hit the shutter button to record. And that's as long as my settings are correct. I may have to do some settings adjustments on either end of that, right? So I don't count that one. But it's a 3-step process back. I'm back to a 3-step process to record, which I hope they can fix that in a firmware update. Allow me to add that feature to this button. It's not in the list of features you can, features that you can add to that button right now. And I checked multiple times thinking I might have missed it. The other thing that they're gonna look to do is I think I found a bug. If you turn this camera on and immediately go to the play button to review images you've taken previously, and you're looking at the LCD screen and decide to go to the EVF, it freezes on the LCD screen. That happened to me 2, maybe 3 times during the weekend. So I think it's definitely a bug. I have pressed the shutter to get it out of that and go back in and it's working. No problem. I can go from EVF to LCD reviewing images with ease. So it doesn't happen. It didn't happen a lot as on all the time that I use the camera. My wife was using it too. It didn't happen to her once, but it did happen to me about, I think it was 3 times. So that's that. And then the other thing that I would like to see them do on the next iteration, because so this is a hardware thing that I want them to consider, is when it comes to the digital zoom button and the off on button, as you see, they have little protrusions on them. The digital zoom, as firm as this is, the toggle as it moves back and forth and goes back to center, which is great. Over time, 1, I can see that as a problem. It not moving is great anymore. And 2, it is on this camera for me the easiest thing that's bumped and moved. So if you happen to put this camera down or have this camera just on in general and you don't land square on that dial at the top, the command dial, and you hit this, you're going to change your digital zoom. As that firmness wears off and it loosens up, it'll probably happen more often. I can see the same thing happening to the off-on button, although the difference between this and the X100 series, which it easily happens on right out of the box, is it for me. This has a really firm click. You really have to get over whatever that stop is in there to turn this camera on. So I never had this camera on, pulling it out of the bag that I had it in once I put it in with it off. So that's a good thing, but I am concerned if that's gonna start happening to this like it does with the 100 series. So those are the 2 things. I wish they can figure out something a little different for the off on button, and I know they're gonna have to figure out something different for that digital zoom toggle. I could just see that becoming a area of contention as this camera starts to get some wear on it. So there you go. That's my initial impressions. Quality coming out of this camera on the images and video is great. I didn't expect it not to be with that sensor. Build quality is stellar. Again, I expected that on the GFX line, and ergos, that was a surprise. That was a nice surprise. Knowing that I don't think I'm gonna need a grip for this camera and only need to just get a screen protector for the back. I'm gonna like. There is one thing I did not talk about with this camera that the X100 series has, which is the dual viewfinder OVF eyepiece thing. I'm not gonna miss it because I honestly don't use my OVF as much on the X Pro that I did, as well as the X100. I tend to use the EVF more, especially on the X Pro, because I tended to use lenses where I wanted to be able to see what the camera sees on the EVF when it comes to the focal length, if that lens I was using was outside the bright lines for the OVF. So I can't say that, guys, that's a concern for me. So there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed this initial first impressions, and hopefully you enjoyed some of the content I wanted to share with you guys while I was out celebrating a family event. And you guys let me know in the comments what you think. Also, again, let me know if you want me to check something out, try something out, any questions I can answer, and I'll see you guys on the next video.